The Ugly Duckling, a tale of self-discovery. Once upon a time, in a peaceful meadow surrounded by towering trees and a glistening pond, a mother duck sat on her nest. The sun was warm, the air was filled with the soft chirping of birds, and all was calm in the world. One by one, her eggs cracked open, and little yellow ducklings tumbled out, chirping with delight. They were soft, fluffy, and as yellow as the sun itself. But there was one egg left behind, bigger and rougher than the others. It didn't hatch right away, and the mother duck grew worried. After many days, with a crack that echoed through the quiet meadow, the final egg began to break open. Out came a duckling, but he was unlike the others. His feathers were a dull, murky gray. His neck was long and gangly, and his beak was awkwardly shaped. The other ducklings stared at him, wide-eyed, before bursting into laughter. "Look at that one, he's huge and ugly," one duckling quacked, waddling away. The mother duck looked at the strange little duckling, unsure. "He may not be like the others, but he's still my child," she whispered. Despite her words, the other animals on the farm didn't share her kindness. As the duck family made their way around the pond, the chickens clucked and the geese honked in unison. "That one doesn't belong here," the chickens clucked. The geese hissed, "Stay away from us, ugly duckling!" Even the goats and the cows turned their heads, sneering at him. The poor duckling's heart sank as he waddled behind his siblings, feeling like an outcast. He tried to keep up with them, but his long legs made him clumsy. Every time he tried to join in, his awkward movements only made the others laugh harder. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the ugly duckling overheard two of the ducks talking. "Why does she even keep him?" one whispered. "He's not like us. He doesn't fit in." Tears welled up in the duckling's eyes. His heart was heavy with sadness. He was tired of being the one who was always laughed at, always left out. That night, while the other animals slept, the ugly duckling quietly slipped away from the barnyard. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay where he wasn't wanted. His little feet splashed through the cold, muddy waters as he wandered farther and farther away. For many days he roamed alone. The forest was dark and deep, and the meadows were wide and empty. He wandered from one lonely pond to another, hoping to find a place where he might finally fit in. But everywhere he went, the same thing happened. The animals would see him, and without fail, they would laugh and tell him he was too strange, too ugly to belong. When the winds grew colder and the trees began shedding their leaves, the ugly duckling found himself at the edge of a large, frozen lake. It was so cold here, much colder than anywhere he'd been. The ice on the lake glittered under the moonlight, and the air smelled sharp and crisp. The duckling shivered, feeling lonelier than ever before. He had no friends, no family, just the endless cold and empty sky above. But then, as if by magic, something caught his eye. He looked up to see a group of magnificent swans soaring high above him, their wings strong and elegant as they glided through the night sky. They called out to each other in a beautiful, melodic way, and the duckling's heart fluttered with awe. "Who are they?" he whispered to himself. He watched them disappear into the distance, their graceful wings vanishing into the horizon. And for the first time in a long while, the ugly duckling felt a strange stirring in his heart, a feeling of longing, of wonder. He didn't know who they were, but he knew deep down that they were different from the other animals he had met. They seemed so beautiful, so free. But the ugly duckling sighed and tucked his head down. "I could never be like them," he whispered. "I'm just a silly, ugly duckling." Days turned into weeks as the harsh winter settled in. The ugly duckling grew thinner and weaker, his body struggling to survive the bitter cold. He spent most of his days hiding in the reeds, barely moving, barely eating. But he refused to give up. One morning, as he emerged from his hiding spot to search for food, something inside him told him to look again at the lake. As he looked into the water, he gasped. His reflection was not what he had seen before. His gray feathers had begun to change. They were no longer dull and matted. His wings were strong and broad. His neck was long and graceful. His beak was sharp and elegant. I'm not a duck," he gasped, his heart racing. "I'm a swan." Just then, the same group of swans that he had seen months before glided down to the lake, their white feathers gleaming in the morning light. The ugly duckling, now the beautiful swan, stretched his wings and took a tentative step forward. One of the swans looked at him, eyes full of warmth and kindness. "Come with us, brother," he said gently. The ugly duckling hesitated. "But I don't belong with you. I'm different." The swan smiled. "You are one of us. You always have been." With that, the ugly duckling spread his wings wide. He felt the breeze against his feathers, and for the first time he soared into the sky. The swans flew beside him, and together they danced in the wind, their wings cutting through the air with strength and grace. For the first time in his life, the swan felt free. He was no longer the awkward, ugly duckling that everyone had mocked. He was powerful, graceful, and beautiful, just like the swans who had accepted him. As they soared higher and higher, the swan realized that beauty doesn't come from how others see you, but from discovering who you truly are. He had always been a swan, just waiting for the right moment to spread his wings. And so, with the wind in his feathers and the sky stretching out before him, the swan flew on, knowing he had finally found where he belonged. The end.